It's good to see you all. I have to tell you how lucky I feel to be able to preach on these texts for the first time. The walk to Emmaus is how many refer to this gospel passage that we've just read from Luke. So my previous encounters with the passage have been limited to New Testament classes in seminary. In fact, I really honestly haven't spent a whole lot of time with the resurrected Jesus in the gospel narratives. But this passage sent me to various sources, including Google. Okay? It really is good for a fast answer. Accounts of sightings of the resurrected Jesus appear some 8, maybe 9 times throughout the Gospels and Paul's letters. But in this meeting with Jesus on the road to Emmaus, we only have this account in Luke. And what a story it is. It's a 2-part action-packed narrative. Note the movement. Lots of coming and going, coming near, walking ahead and vanishing. There's a sense of forward momentum. In the first part, a pair of disciples who are just followers of Jesus, they're not one of the 12, are walking away from Jerusalem towards the town of Emmaus. I have a sense that there's sort of a walk of sadness. Jesus, unrecognized by the men, falls alongside them. The text says, and I love this, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" And they stood still, looking sad. There was something so poignant about that sentence. It's something we can picture. I mean, would you have recognized Jesus if he had asked that sort of mundane question of you while you were walking along? Commentary on this passage suggests that Jesus was unrecognizable to them because it really hadn't occurred to anyone that the resurrected Christ could be a guy just walking along the road next to them. Everyone had expected a very different kind of messianic return. Luke also takes the opportunity to refresh the reader on all the events that have taken place over the last week. The fact that one would redeem all of Israel, this was meant to happen. This was meant to happen within 3 days. Everyone expected it. It was not happening. And now on the 3rd day, all hope had been lost. They were heading to Emmaus to forget about Jesus and the failure of his promise. Jesus responds by doing what Jesus has always done, which is to interpret the scriptures and to remind them that there is a sequence of events that he has prophesied. The next part of the story involves a Eucharistic revelation. At the strong urging of the 2 disciples, Jesus stays with them. The passage reads, "When he was at table with them, he took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him." Again, Luke offers a beautiful vision of table fellowship and the Eucharist sequence, taking, blessing, breaking, and giving as a way of recognizing Christ among us. Then and now. Barbara Brown Taylor writes, "The blindness of the 2 disciples does not keep their Christ from coming to them. He does not limit his post-resurrection appearances to those who have full confidence in him. He comes to the disappointed, the doubtful, the disconsolate. He comes to those who do not know their Bible, who do not recognize him even as they are walking right alongside him. He comes to those who have given up and headed back home." About 15 years ago, I had to go up to Waltham, Massachusetts. I was a new vestry member of a little summer church, and the warden and the rector had decided it was time for an off-site strategic planning retreat. And I'll confess that it was not on my top 10 list of things I wanted to do. It was a 2-day meeting, complete with dinner and an overnight at one of the local hotels. I was admittedly not in the spirit of things as I made my way up to Boston. But a mundane trip from Subway to Penn Station to Amtrak and finally to a cab to Waltham filled me with an undeniable sense that I had been shown something. And so here is how it went. On a very crowded subway, I did what one does on the subway. I averted my gaze so I wouldn't lock eyes with anyone. It was a hot, crowded train filled with commuters. And as I looked up to see what station we were pulling into, I did lock eyes with who seemed to be a trans woman. She was very, very tall and impeccably dressed in a skirt, maybe on her way to work, I don't know. Her hands were holding onto a scarf at her throat, and the look in her eyes was of one not wanting so much to disappear, but to blend in with the crowd. And as I locked eyes with her, I sensed the pain and the complexity of her life. And my commuter attitude was cracked open a little. An hour later, I found myself on a very crowded train to Boston. I embarrassingly admit that I kind of puffed up a bit with attitude and size to make sitting next to me maybe second choice for someone looking for a seat. With the very last seat in the car available, I was rewarded with a very, very large man with 2 canes who took the seat. Again, the point was driven home when I got up to use the bathroom, and the man next to me looked me in the eye and said how sorry he was to be so slow in rising, and how frustrating it was to be so infirm. I felt hot with shame as we fell into easy conversation, my preconceptions hard-checked and noted. And still, when I got to Boston, I found my way to the taxi stand and asked the driver at the front if he knew his way to Waltham. He promised he did. He was from India and had lived in Boston for some time. He seemed confident that he knew where he was going. But alas, he got lost, and I became late and admittedly frustrated. I'm useless with directions, and most certainly my fear of being an incompetent co-pilot, with the fact that we were now hopelessly lost, added to an increasingly anxious energy in the cab. There was an exit he needed to take, and in doing so, he cut off a car. And what came out of the mouth of the person who had been cut off was a series of appalling racist expletives. My driver restrained from shouting back, but he mumbled to himself in frustration, and at that moment, I really didn't care if we got there on time. I saw a slice of his life that ran like the river under all his days, and my heart broke. It took 3 strangers on the road to Boston for me to get out of my own way, my own agenda, and to see the experience for just a moment, the pain of the other, who looked least like me. And the thing is, I knew that I had encountered Christ 3 times, not because I was going on a church retreat. This was way before my call to seminary. My mundane trip to Emmaus had surfaced a most profound revelation. Christ is, in fact, everywhere, all the time. We only have to look. Amen.